Evil Morty may just be the most powerful character in Rick and Morty, even stronger than Rick himself. But how did he become so powerful? Well, I'm about to answer that, and go over every important event which shaped him into who he really is. Because although we call him Evil Morty, is he truly evil or not? Well, let me tell you the story of a young boy who was forced to go to extreme lengths in order to obtain true freedom, and cover his journey of breaking free from the control of others. It's a story of desire for change, as well as one of revenge. Together we'll see what can be done when you recognize the true power within self, for better or for worse. So get ready, sit back, grab a snack if you want, and enjoy. The first time we see Evil Morty in the series is when Rick comes across him in Season 1 Episode 10, titled Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. In this episode, Rick is brought to the Citadel and is accused of killing 27 other Ricks from other dimensions, but he claims he didn't do it and goes on a mission to find the real killer. This leads him to an evil lair with countless Mortys strapped to the outside of it, being put through agonizing pain. While in the lair, the owner of it captures both Rick and Morty. He is known as Evil Rick. During this, we get to see Evil Morty for the first time, while he stands at the side of Evil Rick as his sidekick. Evil Rick then straps Rick C-137 to a table and tells him that he is going to scan his brain to steal his knowledge and then end his life. And while this is going on, Evil Morty brings Morty to a prison cell with tons of other Mortys. As he's being put in the cell, Morty suggests that they rescue all the other Mortys together, but Evil Morty says this to him.
It would be pointless. Mortys have no chance of defeating a Rick.
Not so fast, Evil Morty. That's not exactly true. Because after a motivating speech from our Morty, all the Mortys in the prison decide to come together and overthrow Evil Rick by escaping the prison and then defeat him by piling on top of him. While this is happening, Evil Rick says this.
Do your worst, you little bastards! Kill me! Do it! Do it!
It does seem weird that he would want this, and I'll explain why he does soon enough. So stay tuned for that. After Evil Rick is defeated, members of the Citadel come to take all of the Mortys away from the lair.
What's gonna happen to all these Mortys?
They'll go back to their families, attend school regularly, play video games, date girls. Poor little Rickless bastards.
And while investigating Evil Rick's body, 2 Ricks from the Citadel find out that he was being remotely controlled, and one mentions how he's seen the tech before.
This Rick was being controlled remotely, puppeteered by somebody else. This is the receiver. Yeah, but where's the transmitter?
It turns out that Evil Morty was the one behind it, and that he was doing it all from tech in his eye patch. So I guess he did know that Ricks can be defeated, but had to keep his cover when speaking with Morty. He then destroys the eye patch so he can blend in with all the other Mortys boarding the spaceships to be brought back to where they belong. But why would Evil Morty do this? Why take control of a Rick and do all of these horrible things to these Mortys, as well as kill 27 Ricks? Well, if we dive into his backstory, which takes place before these events, it would seem the answer is because of a want for freedom, as well as revenge. In Season 7 Episode 5 titled Unmort Rickin', we get to see some events of Evil Morty's past, where he himself is complaining to his Rick about the fact that they just went on yet another adventure where he went up a butt. That being a regular type of adventure for them definitely doesn't sound fun. Evil Morty also brought back crystals from this same adventure. Maybe these crystals could be death crystals? Which are crystals that allow you to see future ways you'll die based off of the present moment. We see such crystals in Season 4 Episode 1 titled Edge of Tomorty Rick Die Rick Pete. If these are death crystals, maybe Evil Morty got to see countless deaths of his which were caused by Rick, but whether they are or aren't death crystals, this particular adventure really seemed to set Evil Morty off, and led him to get super mad at his Rick after it, and call him a giant 8-year-old. Then after he says this to his Rick, it causes an argument which makes him mad. Even though he may not show it, Evil Morty has become done with everything different Ricks have put him through at this point, and he's going to do something about it. So he responds to this argument by offering his Rick a drink and then heading to his room to work on making the eye patch from earlier. By the time he's done making the eye patch, his Rick has become drunk. So Evil Morty takes advantage of this and hijacks control of him, then installs the tech to remote control him into his brain. Rick's control over him tired him out, so he decided to be the one in control now. Right after this, we see him take Rick to a Morty adoption agency on the Citadel, but this Rick now has a scar on his mouth. Interesting. Because the Rick which he took control of didn't have this scar. Now you could say that the scar came from Evil Morty installing the device into him. But why would that cause a mouth scar, considering that the device was installed into his brain and not around his mouth? If anything, you'd expect him to have scarring on his head. Could this mean that he's controlled more than one Rick? And Evil Rick is a different Rick than the one we saw him get drunk? Potentially, and I'll get into that more very soon. While at the Morty adoption agency, the Rick at the front desk says this to Evil Morty.
An eye patch. You know how we feel about pirates.
This is a reference to Season 3, Episode 10, titled The Rick, Chury, and Morty Date, where Rick C-137 reveals that he's scared of pirates.
Stand down. He's not afraid of pirates.
Oh, run, Morty! That part was true!
Wow, even the very device Evil Morty uses to take revenge on Rick is purposely trying to scare him. After ending the desk clerk's life, as well as a police officer Rick who comes to help, Evil Morty hacks into the computer system of the adoption agency and deletes his file from their records. This is a major step towards a more free life for himself, as he most likely does this so no more Ricks can keep adopting him and treating him poorly, because he's already had more than one Rick treat him poorly. As well, an interesting thing to take note of is that in the picture on his file, he appears to be sad and frowning, unlike the other Mortys who are smiling. He really is different from the rest, and he's definitely been sick of Rick for a while now. After deleting his file, he begins traveling to different dimensions and ending the lives of a bunch of Ricks, as well as stealing their Mortys. These Ricks are the same ones which the Citadel blamed Rick C-137 for killing. And this is also how he got some of the Mortys which were imprisoned at the Evil Lair in Season 1, Episode 10. While Evil Morty is back at the lair after this, Evil Rick tries to end himself because he has become trapped in his own body and is helpless to the power which Evil Morty has over him. But his efforts are worthless. So this is why he was happy when the rebelling Mortys ended him earlier. Wow. It's clear Evil Morty was very broken to go far enough to do all of this, but it would seem his killing of Ricks isn't necessarily completely just for revenge. As every Rick which he killed, he also scanned the brain of and stole their knowledge. But what would he even need all of this knowledge for? Well, he would need it for a grand plan of his, one that would shatter the very structure of reality itself and provide him a life free from Rick's manipulation and mistreatment. The next steps of this grand plan begin while at the Citadel, after he leaves the evil lair with the multiple Mortys on spaceships. While undercover as a regular Morty, he sees a newspaper in the streets of the Citadel advertising the first ever Citadel election, so he decides to run for president. And in Season 3, Episode 7, titled The Ricklantis Mix-Up, we are brought back to his present story and we get to see the results of this choice to run. It's clear Mortys are underdogs, as even the big news stations of the Citadel make fun of him for running.
It's anyone's race among the Rick candidates, but a certain other candidate should be getting at least one vote for most adorable. Yeah, I think we actually have the audio for his speech here. Oh geez, oh man, I'm gonna lose the election and stuff.
I mean, Mortys have never had any power or influence in such a place as the Citadel, and this is exactly why his campaign manager believes that they should pull out of the race. But Evil Morty disagrees and feels confident about the soon-to-come presidential debate. During the debate, the Ricks who are running alongside him make fun of him, but he stands his ground and gives a speech on how he doesn't see a divide between the Ricks and Mortys of the Citadel, but rather the division he sees is between the Ricks and Mortys who like the Citadel divided and those who don't. He explains how he sees Mortys in schools at the Citadel who are taught by Ricks that all Mortys are the same, because of Ricks feeling threatened by what makes them unique. As well how they give guns to Mortys so they can fight each other in the streets, instead of fighting the real injustice. But also how it's not just the Mortys who are affected. There are also Ricks working in factories who are making a fraction of their boss's salary, even though they are identical people with the same IQ. The Citadel's problem isn't the homeless Mortys or outraged Ricks. The real problem is the Ricks and Mortys who are feeding on the Citadel's death. And then he concludes by saying this.
A message from the Ricks and Mortys that believe in this Citadel to the Ricks and Mortys that don't. You're outnumbered.
After the positive results of this speech, he fires his campaign manager who didn't believe in him, and soon rises to the top of election polls. It is clear he wants to connect to the Ricks and Mortys of the Citadel, and make a difference. Even when asked about who his original Rick is during an interview, he responds by saying how he views every Rick as his Rick. Campaign manager Morty sees this same interview on TV while at a bar after being fired, and a random Rick dressed as a detective hands him secret documents, which cause him fear while watching. So much fear, in fact, that he tries assassinating Evil Morty during his presidential campaigning, but the attempt fails and he is arrested. All while this is going on, we get to see firsthand the issues of the Citadel which Evil Morty mentioned in his campaign speech, such as when a Morty police officer vaporizes an entire house full of criminal Mortys, rather than giving them a fair trial. And his response when asked about it by his partner, who's a Rick, is this.
What happened? Same old story.
Morty's killing Mortys.
After this event, the same Morty cop is shown trying to take a bribe from a crime boss Morty, but his partner stops him from doing so and tells him that he's under arrest, which causes a shootout with the crime boss. The Morty cop then shoots the crime boss after capturing him, because he doesn't want him to talk about the bribe, and then tries to shoot his partner Rick as well, which causes him to get shot by this Rick. While getting arrested after this incident, when the Rick cop is asked what happened, he says this:
Same old story. Rick's killing Mortys.
Wow, it's very clear the extent which Mortys are victims on the Citadel. Mortys view the default narrative as Mortys killing Mortys,
Same old story. Morty's killing Mortys.
and Rick's view the default narrative as Rick's killing Mortys.
Same old story. Rick's killing Mortys.
We even get to see another example of the truth of Evil Morty's political debate speech involving the mistreatment of Mortys, when we are shown Mortys in a school being brainwashed by their teacher, who's a Rick.
This is a great adventure.
This is a great adventure.
I love being your new Morty.
And then some of these same Mortys are discussing their theories on a hidden wishing portal in the Citadel, and all the nice places it could possibly lead to. But one of them named Slick says this:
Yeah, I bet it goes nowhere. I bet it's a big hole where the Citadel dumps all its broken dreams.
It turns out he has this negative view on things because he is an experimental Morty who was given a drama implant, and can't help but be negative. These Mortys soon after find out that the wishing portal is a real thing, and in order for their wish to come true, they'll have to give up something very important. So Slick says and does this:
Morty wishes never come true. Not on the Citadel. I wish anything about this life would change. Well, I hope you're putting something pretty important in there. Me too. But I doubt it. No!
Right after this wish is made, Evil Morty wins the election and begins rebranding the Citadel.
Holy crap! Slick's wish came true!
Now that Evil Morty is president, he meets with the deep state of the Citadel, who are a bunch of Ricks that control everything behind the scenes, and one of them lets him know that he has no true power and that nothing will change, despite his presidency. So Evil Morty asks them all to raise their hand if they agree with this Rick, and he has everyone who raised their hand killed. It would seem he has more power than even the deep state thought. Something about Evil Morty is different. Evil Morty's guards then end the campaign manager Morty's life by dumping him out of an airlock, while he was trying to expose the secrets of who this new president really is to them. But on the other hand, the Rick officer from earlier is set free under Evil Morty's new presidency. Interesting. Could it be because he was someone who actually believed in justice? Then at the end of the episode, we see the bodies of the Deep State, Cop Morty, the Rick who hosted the presidential debate, Big Morty the crime boss, the Detective Rick who gave campaign manager Morty the secret files, and campaign manager Morty, all having been thrown out of the airlock by Evil Morty's guards, as well as plenty of other bodies. And the secret files which campaign manager Morty received are shown blown open with pictures of Evil Morty having a Rick which he is controlling, while also wearing a suit. This means that he must have taken control of yet another Rick after Evil Rick died, because he was only ever wearing a suit while running for president, and while being president, and not while Evil Rick was alive. This Rick in the secret files is not Evil Rick, and Evil Morty is seemingly behind much more than we may have initially thought, and maybe even everything.
Now is the time for action.
Now that Evil Morty has control of the Citadel, he has become even more powerful than he already was, and he uses this power to push himself towards his ultimate goal: freedom. The next steps in his plan take place during Season 5, Episode 10, titled Rick Mirai Jack, when he invites Rick C-137 and Morty Prime to dinner. While at dinner, Evil Morty asks Rick about bringing down the central finite curve, and when Rick doesn't tell him anything, Evil Morty decides to trap them in their chairs and show them parts of the brain scan which he took from Rick while puppeting Evil Rick in Season 1, Episode 10. Rick then makes a comment about how he must have gotten this information from the encounter with Evil Rick, and Evil Morty responds by making fun of Rick's biased labeling, and how he uses the word evil to describe the Rick which was remote controlled.
Evil Rick, I love it. Smartest man in the universe, with an ego so big you can just grab it like a joystick.
Morty Prime then apologizes to Rick for getting them in this situation by accepting to go to dinner in the first place, and Evil Morty points out that this apology from Morty is something that Mortys are bred to do, so he doesn't blame him for essentially worshipping Rick. Evil Morty understands because he is aware of Rick's deep secrets, after all this brain scanning he's done to many of them. So he then proceeds to give Morty Prime some insight on the deeper truth, by letting him see part of Rick's brain scan. He shows Morty Prime how there's an entire market at the Citadel for Mortys, and that Ricks steal DNA from Mortys to constantly make clones of them, across infinity, for their own personal pleasure. There's factories for managing both the production and death of Mortys, And this is a sick process going on across countless realities.
This is why we're with them. This is why we're alive.
Right after this is revealed, Evil Morty lets both Rick and Morty escape. But as Rick is about to walk through his portal, he notices the smug look on Evil Morty's face. So he tests the portal by throwing one of Evil Morty's guards through it, and the guard dies. It turns out that this is the only time Rick's portal gun has ever been hacked by someone. So the fact that Evil Morty was able to do it really says something. Even after this, he still decides to let Rick and Morty freely escape, all while telling Rick this.
You can't outrun your past, Rick.
Although it wasn't just Rick's portal gun he hacked, because right after Rick, C-137, and Morty Prime leave his office, he makes an announcement across the Citadel saying nobody leave, everybody stay, which causes panic and makes Rick's and Morty's want to leave. And it turns out that every portal gun at the Citadel was hacked, so all the Ricks and Mortys trying to leave end up dying. Because of every portal gun being hacked, and Evil Morty's questioning about the central finite curve from earlier, Rick C-137 assumes that Evil Morty is going to try and use the Citadel's dimensional drive to blow the central finite curve, meaning they'll have to get out of the Citadel fast. So they try to go and get portal fluid which hasn't been tampered with from the main source in the Citadel, but Evil Morty has already begun draining it all. During this, they come across Evil Morty again, who is already at the dimensional drive, and he shows Morty how Ricks are responsible for building a wall around infinity, which separates all the universes where Rick is the smartest man alive from the ones where he's not, and this is what the central finite curve is. He points out how Rick has done this because he views himself as a victim due to his traumatizing past. And Evil Morty no longer wants a part of it. He no longer wants to be a victim of Rick's selfishness, and he wants to leave to a place of freedom.
That's what makes me evil, being sick of him. If you've ever been sick of him, you've been evil too.
This is the exact bias that Evil Morty pointed out earlier, when Rick referred to the Rick which Evil Morty controlled as Evil Rick. He did so because of his own personal bias, and in the central finite curve where Rick is the smartest man and manipulates Mortys for his own pleasure infinitely. A Morty who simply wants freedom and doesn't want to be a part of it is by default labeled as evil. Evil Morty pointing this out causes Morty Prime to reflect on Rick's mistreatment of himself.
There you go, kid. Now you're Evil Morty too. Sooner or later we all are. On this side of the curve.
And Evil Morty then proceeds to flood the Citadel with hacked portal fluid, so countless Ricks are killed. Usually when Ricks die, their consciousness gets uploaded into a new clone body due to Operation Phoenix, which is a protocol Rick has in place so he can never die. Operation Phoenix is something which is covered in Season 4 Episode 1 titled Edge of Tomorty Rick Die Repeat, where Rick dies many times, but each time his consciousness gets uploaded into a new body and he continues living. But while the portal fluid is flooding the Citadel and killing tons of Ricks, Operation Phoenix won't save them this time, as Evil Morty even hacked Operation Phoenix and made it transfer their consciousnesses into clone vats near the dimensional drive, so all of the Ricks and Mortys could be killed, and he could use their blood to power the drive which would break the central finite curve and open a hole into the multiverse. While preparing to leave, Evil Morty offers Morty Prime to come with him if he'd like, but Morty Prime chooses to help Rick instead, and it turns out the supposed extra seat in Evil Morty's spaceship was a toilet anyway. He then launches himself into the black hole which will free him from the central finite curve and bring him to the multiverse. Finally, he can stop frowning like the photo on his adoption file, and he begins smiling as he enters the beyond, leaving the Citadel in chaos behind him. Finally, he is free at last. But not for long. In Season 7, Episode 5, titled Unmort Rickon, Evil Morty finally gets to enjoy the freedom he's been chasing for so long, and is relaxing in a new home base he has, outside of the central finite curve. This is all good until randomly he is attacked by a monster because of the integrity of the central finite curve being compromised. And this compromise causes the branch of the multiverse which he's living in to be disturbed. It turns out that Rick C-137 and Morty Prime accidentally caused this to happen by messing with plenty of dimensions in order to try and find Rick C-137's enemy, Rick Prime. So Evil Morty decides to visit them and put a stop to this disturbance. Can't you for once let a Morty have some peace, Rick? That was kind of the whole reason he even left to the multiverse in the first place.
I don't live here, which is why it's insane that you're still bugging me.
Because Evil Morty doesn't want to deal with Rick, he gives him a tip to make the process more efficient, without disturbing him in the multiverse. This change causes them to find a decoy of Rick Prime, which brings them to a trap of primes. And after outsmarting the trap while working together as a team, Rick gets a new lead on finding Rick Prime, because of some goo which he got from the trap. Even after this, Evil Morty still chooses to stick around, because because he is aware of Rick Prime having a weapon called the Omega device, which can wipe people from infinity, and Evil Morty does not like the idea of someone else having this weapon, because that would mean that he himself could be wiped from infinity by it. Rick then goes to kill Rick Prime on his own, and Evil Morty doesn't trust in Rick's ability to do so, so he decides to follow along and bring Morty with him to Rick Prime's base, where all of them end up fighting Rick Prime together. During this fight, Rick and Evil Morty are both defeated by Rick Prime, and Morty Prime is left in an awkward reunion with his grandpa. But during the time where Rick Prime puts his guard down, Morty Prime stuns him, which incapacitates him. But it turns out that during the chaos, Evil Morty switched shirts with Morty Prime, as well as put an eye patch on him to confuse Rick Prime, and faked being his grandson. Now that Evil Morty has Rick Prime incapacitated, he does what he's done to all the other Ricks, and steals his knowledge with a brain scan, as well as deletes his Operation Phoenix backups. During this brain scan, Rick Prime recognizes how intelligent Evil Morty is, so he offers him to be his sidekick, and tells him how they can be like Batman and Robin.
I don't need a Robin.
Clearly, Evil Morty is aware of how much more powerful he is than even people such as Rick Prime. And this time, instead of ending a brain scan by killing the Rick, Evil Morty drags Rick C-137 into the room and revives him, knowing that he'll finish the job for him anyway. And he then proceeds to destroy the Omega device. When Rick walks out of the room, having just killed Rick Prime, Evil Morty says this to him.
How's it feel? Better? No? Exactly the same? Yeah, it always does.
Now, why would he say this? Has Evil Morty seen these exact events with another Rick before? Events regarding Rick getting revenge on his lifelong nemesis just to feel nothing? Why would he say that it always feels the same? Could Rick C-137 just be another one of the countless Ricks which Evil Morty has manipulated in order to obtain revenge on Ricks across infinity? Maybe that's why when Evil Morty helped Rick and Morty to more easily find Rick Prime, instantly right after this they got sent to a trap. I mean, during the same conversation after defeating Prime, Evil Morty briefly shows blueprints of the Omega device, and then mentions how he can end the Rick experiment anytime he wants. Did he really just now obtain the blueprints to the Omega device? Or has he had them for a while? Why else would he call it ending the Rick experiment? You'd think that calling it an experiment could potentially mean that my theory about him doing these same kinds of things to Rick across infinity might just be true. To Evil Morty, maybe Ricks are just a toy to play and mess with, just as how we as the audience usually see Morty as the one who Ricks play and mess with, for their own personal pleasure. That could be why Evil Morty consistently lets Rick C-137 escape, even while Rick is actively wanting to try and kill him. I mean, remember why Evil Morty even wears an eye patch in the first place? It's to control a Rick. And we know that based on the secret files which campaign manager Morty received, Evil Morty controlled at least one other Rick besides Evil Rick during his time running for president. Maybe he's wearing the eye patch to control Rick Prime, and to fake out Rick C-137, that Prime was the one who caused his trauma, even though it may have been Evil Morty all along. Could it be Evil Morty who used the Omega device to kill Rick's wife across infinity? It does seem kind of weird that Rick Prime would essentially kill his own wife across infinity, so it easily could have been Evil Morty puppeting him to do so he himself wouldn't have to take any blame, but rather Rick Prime takes the blame. We do know that Evil Morty is aware of what could happen if he himself was to use the Omega device on someone and be blamed for it.
Using a weapon like this doesn't get you left alone, Morty. Think I want a bunch of vengeful summers coming after me?
And why was Evil Morty even wearing an eye patch at all during his time with Rick C-137? If the whole purpose of the eye patch is to control people, it's quite possible he probably just wants to be left alone to enjoy his freedom, all while still being able to mess with different Ricks across infinity as a form of revenge with little repercussions. And his ultimate goal could just be enslaving as many Ricks as possible, and using them as a weapon so he can stand a chance against the most powerful Rick of all, Rick C-137.
It's okay, he's free to go. He's the Rickest Rick. We'll never see him again.
He isn't just the Rickest Rick, but he's also the man who interferes with Evil Morty's freedom and peace, which he doesn't appreciate.
I don't live here, which is why it's insane that you're still bugging me.
Rick may be playing a game of checkers in the central finite curve, but Evil Morty is playing chess in the multiverse. And further evidence of this ultimate goal is in Season 4, Episode 6, titled Never Ricking Morty, where Rick and Morty are getting drained of stories they have by a villain named Storylord. And after draining Rick of many stories which are not important to him, he finds a story which is sacred to Rick, and this makes Rick start to panic. So Storylord then asks him this.
What's wrong, Rick? Don't you want to see how your story ends?
And then we get to see a giant army of Ricks, Mr. Meeseeks, and male Gazorpazorps, with an evil Mr. Poopy Butthole, as well as evil Morty leading them all to kill Rick and Morty, with all Ricks being controlled by evil Morty's eye patch. And things seem hopeless for Rick and Morty, but...
There's always someone there for us.
Who?
My best friend and personal savior, Jesus Christ.
What?
Yeah, Morty, I don't even know.
I beg your pardon?
We were literally saved by Jesus Christ. Tell me in any way how that's offensive.
I guess maybe we will see if any of this theory becomes true in later seasons. It's definitely crazy what trauma can cause people to do. In Evil Morty's case, it would seem that he dealt with his own trauma by seeking revenge, all while pursuing freedom from these traumas. And he didn't care about the damage he would have to cause in order to obtain this freedom. So, is he really Evil Morty, or not? It would seem he was forced to do these things all because of how he was treated by Rick, and that's how he views it himself as well.
That's what makes me evil. Being sick of him.
Whether you believe Evil Morty's actions were justified or not, I believe we can all take away a lesson from his story. Realistically, there's no difference between the backstory of a villain and a hero. Both heroes and villains experience trauma and mistreatment from others, same as how all of us do. But the thing that causes us to call one a villain and one a hero is the fact that the villain takes their trauma and thinks to themselves, I was mistreated and caused trauma, so now I must get my revenge and mistreat the world right back. As for the hero, they take their trauma and think to themselves, I was mistreated and caused trauma, so now I must make sure that no one else experiences the same things I went through. Do you want to be the hero or the villain? It's your choice. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably enjoy one of my videos where I explain Rick's entire story and go over how trauma can cause even the brightest minds to become deeply flawed. Or you can check out this other video of mine, which YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Both options are on the screen right now. As well, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And remember to ask yourself if you want to be the villain or the hero. Have a good one.